Surprise visit. Weapons inspectors search one of Saddam's lavish palaces. The UN says the work is going well. The U.S. claims it is not. Damage control. The Saudis outline their new crackdown in the financial war on terror. Can they be trusted? Terror weapon. Protecting airplanes from missile attacks. How easy is it to shoot down a passenger plane? And Lifeline, the cutting edge. Surgery, where the doctor is across the room or halfway around the world.
From NBC News, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Reporting tonight from Los Angeles.
Good evening. It is already Wednesday morning in Iraq, and who knows what the new day will bring in this high-stakes poker game now underway between Saddam Hussein, UN weapons inspectors, and President Bush. Today, the game was showdown. All the cards on the table as the inspectors suddenly appeared at one of Saddam's most important palaces, their first visit to a presidential site under the new rules. At the same time, the inspectors are getting mixed reviews back in America, praise from Kofi Annan at the UN, skepticism from President Bush. NBC's Ron Allen again in Baghdad.
Today, the strongest challenge yet to Saddam Hussein. All 17 UN inspectors target al-Sajud, his working palace, Iraq's version of the White House West Wing. 2 UN teams simultaneously demand to enter the front and back gates. Trying moments for the inspectors while armed guards block their way. Then 10 minutes later, they step aside. Inside, lavish decor, a grand entrance hall, several stories high, covered in white marble, the walls inscribed with golden letters, poems praising Saddam. The inspectors go room to room, even checking a broom closet and a refrigerator, and finding a jar of jam.
All our inspectors are able to inspect every room, every corner of the site.
The search takes 2 hours. No word on what they looked for or what they found. The palace, seen in this satellite picture, is connected to a huge complex of official buildings with villas and condos for Saddam's top deputies, one of 8 presidential sites on the UN's list of suspicious locations. A former inspector says the team will probably return to do a more thorough inspection.
What they really wanted to do is establish their right of unimpeded access, and they got that established, and we have a new baseline here.
There is a strong difference of opinion between Washington and the UN on how the inspections are going. Yesterday, President Bush.
So far, the signs are not encouraging.
Today, the UN Secretary General with a much different assessment of the inspectors' first week.
It's only been a week, and obviously the cooperation seems to be good, but this is not a one-week wonder.
But again today, at a political rally in Louisiana, the president was skeptical.
I tell you, the issue is not the inspectors. The issue is whether or not Mr. Saddam Hussein will disarm like he said he would. We're not interested in hide and seek inside Iraq. The fundamental question is, will this man disarm? The choice is his.
And tonight in Iraq, Saddam Hussein's government says it will give the UN a full inventory of its weapons programs on December 7th, one day ahead of the UN deadline. A top Iraqi general insisting the document will prove to a skeptical world that Iraq no longer has weapons of mass destruction. Ron Allen, NBC News, Baghdad.
As the inspectors did their work in Iraq, the government of Turkey today offered to let the United States use its military bases if the UN approves of a war with Iraq. Turkey, an Iraqi neighbor, is mostly Muslim and has said it opposes a war. But the offer came as Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz met with the Turkish Prime Minister and offered America's help in Turkey's economic recovery. And Saudi Arabia today formally announced what NBC's Andrea Mitchell reported last night, that it will radically overhaul the system governing Saudi charities so they can't be used as a front for terrorists. Andrea has more tonight.
The usually secretive Saudis announce an unprecedented crackdown on their charities, while still denying that they are knowingly financing al-Qaeda.
It's a feeding frenzy. It's let's bash the Saudis time. We are guilty before we say anything.
For the first time, the Saudis announced they have frozen $5.6 million in 33 bank accounts, involving 3 individuals and 1 charity. From now on, they promise to audit all charities and follow the money. A huge step, say top U.S. officials, if the Saudis follow through.
Our government welcomes the fact that the Saudis have pledged to take action. The effectiveness of that remains to be seen.
Why are many Americans still suspicious? First, because prominent Saudis like Ambassador to the U.S. Prince Bandar, living in this palatial estate on the Potomac, cannot fully account for his family's personal charity. And the Saudis are not cracking down on government-supported charities like the International Islamic Relief Organization, with a branch in Virginia. NBC News has learned under investigation by the U.S. for terror activities. Adel Al-Jaber says there is no evidence of that.
It just would not be fair, it would not be just to punish people or to freeze accounts or to level charges at organizations whose purpose is to do good based on either whims or hearsay.
Nor have the Saudis cracked down on Osama bin Laden's brother-in-law, Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, under investigation by the U.S. for supporting worldwide terror networks, still at large in Saudi Arabia.
He should have been arrested and prosecuted by the Saudi government, but he wasn't. He is a key peg in the al-Qaeda network.
All this is galling to families of 9/11 victims like Peter Alderman, his mother Liz.
There is so much that they said today that was just outright lies that I certainly don't have any trust that they will eventually do what they say.
Critics say the Saudi charities are so much a part of the government that a real crackdown would mean attacking their own regime. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News at the State Department.
Also in the Middle East, an unexpected victory tonight for Egypt's best-known dissident, Saad Eden Ibrahim, a sociologist who's been campaigning for democratic reforms and human rights in that country. When his activism landed him in jail in Egypt, President Bush and many others protested to the government in Cairo. Today, without explanation, Egypt's highest court said that Ibrahim is entitled to a retrial. He was immediately released from prison and reunited with his family. Here in Los Angeles, there's also an urgent focus on war, the war on gangs that have turned this city into what one local activist this week compared to Afghanistan, with warlords operating unchecked in their enclaves of power. And today, the city's new police chief called the gang problem, quote, a threat to national security. Here's NBC's Chip Reed.
In South Los Angeles, yet another funeral for a teenage boy.
I'm a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, watching our children die like dogs.
Police say that in gang-infested neighborhoods here, they are outmanned and outgunned.
Where are they getting these guns from? These guns sound like military guns. Boom, 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 boom. South Central is a war zone.
With 617 homicides so far this year, Los Angeles now leads the nation. There have been 35 homicides in Los Angeles in just the past 2 weeks, much of it concentrated here in South LA, most of it gang-related. Police Chief William Bratton has been on the job barely a month, but already sees gangs as his biggest challenge.
Your gang situation in this city is unlike anything else in America. Scares the hell out of me in the sense of how entrenched these people are, how sophisticated they are, and their numbers.
Today, Bratton announced a redeployment of forces to battle LA's 100,000 gang members. He calls it focused policing, putting the cops where the problems are.
Some Saturday nights, there are no gang units working in this city. That's going to end.
Bratton believes his strategy can do here what it did in New York City in the 90s, where he oversaw a dramatic drop in crime. Ed Turley has counseled LA gang members for more than 20 years.
Most of them don't see themselves living past the age of 21. They have a real sense of hopelessness.
Turley says gang culture is so deeply rooted here, it is a problem the police alone cannot solve. But Bratton is determined to try. People here hope he can stop the killing after so many others have failed. Chip Reed, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And as we saw a few moments ago, President Bush was back on the campaign trail today in Louisiana, where a runoff election for the Senate is set for Saturday. The president is trying to add to his narrow margin in the Senate by campaigning hard for the Republican challenger to a Democratic incumbent in a race featuring two women and a take-no-prisoners tone. Here's NBC's David Gregory.
With his election year popularity again being tested, Mr. Bush barnstormed through Louisiana today, hoping to add to the GOP's slim Senate majority.
Susie Terrell needs to be the next United States Senator.
The runoff pits the one-term Democratic incumbent Mary Landrieu against the state's elections commissioner, Susie Terrell, in a race that's gotten close and nasty.
Would you tell our viewers why you support raising taxes on 95% of the people of our state?
Once again, Mary, you're 100% false and 100% negative.
For Landrieu, the race highlights the same dilemma other Democrats face this year, offering support for a wartime president popular among swing voters while not alienating core Democratic supporters.
Mary Landrieu voted with President Bush 74% of the time.
Landrieu is walking a fine line, also reassuring her political base she's no rubber stamp.
The president's policies are not all right for Louisiana all the time, and they need a senator that can represent this state.
Terrell, however, is proud to ride the president's coattails. Today, he's raising more than $1 million for her. And there's his record. Some 36 candidates the president stumped for won in this election year. Only a dozen or so lost.
I know you want a senator who will bend your ear about what's important to Louisiana, and you know I will.
Terrell, who could be the first ever Republican elected to the Senate from Louisiana, has benefited from high-powered help. Both parties have poured money into a race, which will be decided by voter turnout.
So the key is who actually realizes that this is going to be election day, that this is going to elect a U.S. senator. It's all about getting people to the polls.
Thanks, y'all. Remember to vote.
In this, the final Senate showdown of the midterm election. David Gregory, NBC News, Shreveport, Louisiana.
On Wall Street today, a negative earnings forecast from Time Warner AOL helped send stocks down. As a result, the Dow lost almost 120 points on the day. NASDAQ was down just under 36 points on the day. Still ahead tonight, the potential danger of terrorists with Stinger missiles firing at commercial airliners and the rush to find a way to defend against that. Up next, In Depth, an American couple fighting a worldwide epidemic. Brian Williams reporting tonight from Africa. Now, NBC News In Depth. This is AIDS Awareness Week, and we have the story of a group of Americans whose faith calls them back to a region of the world that has been devastated by AIDS, where many children grow up without parents because of it. NBC's Brian Williams traveled to Malawi, a sub-Saharan nation roughly the size of Pennsylvania, to see how they are bringing hope and healing to the next generation.
Malawi in southern Africa, a nation Dr. Tom Nicewander had to come back to.
You're okay?
A nation his wife Ruth could never forget. A place that marked Dr. Kevin Denny's life forever.
We're paying back for an experience that changed our lives.
The year was 1964. They came to Malawi, a newly independent southern African nation. They were idealistic Peace Corps workers, inspired by the words of their young president.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
They took those words literally, and like so many other young people of that era, they set out to really make a difference.
And down.
Now they want to make a difference again. 40 years later, close to retirement, they have chosen to leave their comfortable lives behind and come back to Malawi.
We discovered that grandmothers in every village were raising 14 or 15 kids. The reason being that 3 or 4 or 5 of their own children had fallen victim to AIDS.
Back in '64, the problem was tuberculosis. Today, it's AIDS. With almost 20% of the population infected, the average life expectancy is now 37 years of age. It is a nation where coffin-making workshops are offered 24 hours a day. Tom, a doctor, his wife Ruth, a nurse, were just married in 1964 as young Peace Corps volunteers.
You're treating the children on a one-to-one basis, but do you imagine this gets worse and you start getting overpowered?
Oh, it could be, absolutely. In fact, the safety nets here are built with a very fine thread.
So the former Peace Corps volunteers built their own safety net, the Malawi Children's Village, a program designed to help children whose parents have died of AIDS.
As one local aid worker put it, even here in the hospitals, no one ever dies of AIDS. The cause of death is always something else, often tuberculosis. It's still very private here, still very much a taboo.
The impact of not talking about AIDS, its dangers never get taught. Walk into some Malawi villages, and the young and middle-aged adults are missing. The volunteers work with 3,000 orphans in 37 different villages.
What happens is during the act of sex,
These days, there's AIDS education, there's tutoring, and vocational training. Now the school-age children here sing songs about the dangers of AIDS, and that's a huge step forward in a land where many still can't talk about the plague that took their parents away. Brian Williams, NBC News, Malawi.
Up next, protecting airplanes from missile attacks here at home. It's been almost 15 months now since the September 11th hijackings, and according to the Transportation Security Administration, plenty of travelers this past holiday still seem to be unclear on what is not allowed on airlines these days. The officials released a list of the confiscated items, which included 16,000 knives, almost 100 box cutters, 6 guns, and a brick. The brick was discovered in a carry-on at Reagan National Airport in Washington. Officials said they had no idea why the person was traveling with a brick. Now to a new worry for air travelers from below. Al-Qaeda's attempt to shoot down an Israeli airliner with shoulder-launched missiles in Kenya last week has experts in this country scrambling to figure out how to defend against a threat that terrorists have long been aware of, but now it's just being taken seriously. More from NBC's Robert Hager.
Just as travelers get used to new federal screeners and worry about a year-end deadline for bomb detection, now the threat of shoulder-fired missiles. They're old Russian-made SA-7s or old US-made Stingers, using sensors that zero in on the heat in a plane's engines. Retired Army General Barry McCaffrey.
It's a serious threat. Authorities have to take into account some aircraft probably ought to get modified for high-risk flight.
In defense, some military aircraft use systems that can spot missiles and release hot flares to draw the weapons away. And there are newer systems that aim laser beams at the missile. Watch this test. Here's a target aircraft. Here's a missile coming toward it. The plane fires a laser beam at the missile like this, and watch how the laser beam confuses the missile's guidance and sends it spiraling off course. But the cost is huge, from $2 million per plane up to $5 million. Maybe okay for some military planes in combat, or for Air Force One, which does have missile defense.
But for commercial airliners in the U.S., there's 6,000 flying, times $2 or $3 million each, for airlines already cutting out snacks to save money and flirting with bankruptcy.
Many say it's just not going to happen.
I can't imagine we're going to put a $3 million package on. You know, if we started to do it today, it'd take us 5 to 10 years to equip the fleet.
Others wonder if the threat's really that bad. Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's Eric Doten.
I don't believe that a handheld missile is going to bring down an airliner. That's my personal belief, and it's based upon the fact that it's got a very small warhead and that at best it would be able to hit one engine.
Which means it still ought to be flyable. So for now, U.S. officials have simply warned airlines to start thinking about shoulder-fired missiles. The silver bullet to ward them off without spending a fortune hasn't been invented yet. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
I'll be right back. Surgery by robot.
Coming up tonight here on the Channel 4 News at 11 o'clock. Save money, save time, and aggravation. We'll show you what some popular stores are doing this holiday season when it comes to returning gifts. It may change how and where you shop. Plus, cracking down on dangerous dogs, what one local city is considering doing, and how it could affect you and your pet. Tonight, Channel 4 News at 11.
Tonight on Lifeline, the leading edge, the brave new world of surgery in which robots replace the long-cherished tradition of doctors with great hands. As NBC's Robert Bazell reports, doctors still are in charge, but the cutting and stitching are much less invasive, and it can all be done from across the room or even further away.
When David Ritchie decided to undergo abdominal surgery to treat persistent acid reflux,
everything that I eat comes up, and I'm tired of it.
The UCLA doctors told him they wanted to operate using an experimental robot. Why a robot? The hope is it will make it easier for doctors to do endoscopic surgery that uses instruments far smaller than the human hand, put through tiny incisions, allowing patients to recover much more quickly. Now it is done close up through tubes. With the robot, the surgeon sits at a console, operating the machinery with a wide range of motion of the hands, also using the feet and voice commands.
He's soft down.